all to an exclusive unveiling event of book titled Swallowing the Sun by Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri at this iconic property of Taj Krishna here in city of Nawabs, Hyderabad. This event is held under the gracious patronage of Shree Cements Limited as their CSR activity. Before we have the opportunity to listen to the author Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri and conversationalist for the day, Dr. Sunaina Singh, I would like to introduce Prabha Khaitan Foundation and its varied works. Prabha Khaitan Foundation is a Kolkata-based non-profit trust and is recognized as an organization that creates finest literary and cultural experiences on the global map. The foundation was established by an eminent Indian literature activist, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and feminist, late Dr. Prabha Khaitan, back in 1980s. With the envision of late Dr. Prabha Khaitan and her golden philosophy, Karma Hi Jeevan Hai, the foundation strives relentlessly to create cultural capital through activities and endeavors that propagate literary and cultural assets of India. In past 4 decades, Foundation grew in stature and recognition as an organization that gives best platform to writing geniuses and showcases kaleidoscopic cultural heritage of India. Foundation dedicatedly works across more than 500 plus cities to connect readers to literary creations of authors, poets, showcases talented musicians, dancers, storytellers, and performing artists through its stellar literary and cultural initiatives. Foundation cherishes the close association of distinguished associates, collaborators, partners, and Ehsaas women of India in creating landmark events on the global map. It supports UNESCO view that cultural development has potential to be an alternative way of promoting sustainable development in poor rural communities. Anthem of Prabha Khaitan Foundation deserves a special mention. It is ensured by national philosophy, unity in diversity. The anthem of Prabha Khaitan Foundation has been curated by musical genius Pandit Vishwa Mohan Bhattji. The anthem reflects true a sense of multicultural diversity of India. A literary initiative, Kitab, occupies a unique significance for us, marking the emergence of each birth of a book and offering authors a stage to present their latest literary works to an insightful and discerning audience. Before we start the launch ceremony, I would like to invite my fellow Ehsaas woman, Maurya Voda, to formally introduce the star author Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri and take the proceedings forward.
Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri has been an Indian Foreign Service diplomat for 28 years. She served in leadership positions at United Nations for 15 years, most recently as its Assistant Secretary General. She was a leader in the first global organization to promote gender equality, UN Women, for the 7 foundational years. She is the recipient of the Eleanor Roosevelt Award for Human Rights, among others. I kindly request Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri ji to come onto the stage. May we have a huge round of applause for her. Now it is with great honor and privilege that we welcome our chief guest, Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, to grace this esteemed stage, illuminating it with her presence. Sangeeta Reddy is an Indian business person who works as a joint managing director for Apollo Hospitals. Although with her unparalleled vision, she is a name that needs no absolute introduction. Allow me to welcome on stage yet another name of profound wisdom and illustrious work, Mr. Nazeeb Jung. He is a retired Indian Administrative Service Officer who served as the 20th Lieutenant Governor of Delhi from July 2013 to December 2016. He is a renowned author himself. I would also like to humbly request the conversationalist for today, Sunaina Singh, to come onto the stage, please. Prabha Khaitan Foundation promotes cross-cultural understanding and appreciation. We promote local artisans and their artifacts to show appreciation to our patrons and guests by endorsing their products. We encourage all to buy local products from local craftsmen in their sustainability and development. All our events, local food is served, which means spreading awareness about more locally grown produce in the city and the community. Highlighting the relevance of the same today, we are pleased to felicitate with the ethnic handloom scarves. Here we are giving chicken curry stoles from the Lucknow. I would now like to cordially request and call upon Anandita Chatterjee, Executive Trustee, Prabha Kaitan Foundation, and our Ehsas women, Anjum Babu Khan and Mansi Malik, to come onto the stage.
पधारो हमारा देश যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে
Now for the moment we all have been waiting for here is the book launch ceremony of Swallowing the Sun.
একলা চলো রে
बरसने लागी बदरिया रूम झूम के बरसने लागी बदरिया रूम झूम के रूम झूम रूम झूम रूम झूम के बरसने लागी बदरिया रूम झूम के बरसने लागी
तोरे नैना की लागी कटार सजनी चैन पावे न मनवा हमार सजनी चैन पावे न मनवा हमार सजनी तोरे नैना नैना रे तोरे नैना की लागी कटार सजनी
My humble request to Mrs. Puri and Sunaina Singh to take their seats on the stage. Sangeeta Reddy, you are known for your indomitable spirit. It would be a privilege if you could share a few words with us, please.
Our special woman of the moment, but also a woman for all time, Lakshmi. It is indeed such a pleasure to be amongst all of you today on this day, which marks the beginning of her additional career. So good evening, and I am indeed honored and delighted to be a part of this event for the brilliant book Swallowing the Sun, and truly the radiant debut novel of my friend Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri. It was a no-brainer for me to be here, but yet it also took a little thought because I am in the middle of campaigning, but then nobody says no to Lakshmi. And more than that, my presence here is also a sign of my gratitude to her, because in my time as the head of FICCI, we together created an initiative called the Greater 50, which was a step forward in a realm of something that she strongly believes in, and that is women empowerment. And as our spokesperson, as our inspiration for the Greater 50, Lakshmi did innumerable conversations on stage, on Zoom calls, and represented this important cause. So Lakshmi, I would have dropped anything to be here with you. Congratulations. There is a special individual who is sitting here amongst us, Mr. Puri, and I would like to acknowledge your presence. And I think we should give him a big hand. Because he's also playing a dual role here. He's playing the role as a role model of a husband who supports from the back. And despite all his own personal accolades, Mr. Puri, we're very, very inspired by you, your presence and your demeanor. But jumping to what we're all here about, I really think that this path-breaking work that she has created and continues on the theme which has been so much a part of her life, which is women empowerment and gender equality. And this novel is masterful, not just because of the subject, but because of its brilliant usage of words, of theme, of character, of creativity. It exudes a charm and a cadence that I have rarely come across in recent times. And as many of you know, this has not just become a best-selling, record-breaking novel. I think it's had 4 reprints. They've done 11,000 copies, and the word of mouth is picking up so much that it's going to break more records. So let's give it a big hand. But honestly, to talk about a novel like Swallowing the Sun through the notion of sales is akin to talking about monuments through the notion of number of people who visit every day. This goes beyond. This goes far, far beyond. From inspiration, from structure, it is like the splendor and the majesty of beautiful architecture. And it is in that realm that Swallowing the Sun is a rare thing, a novel that breathes and lives to its evocative fullness. I did not think I would have the time to go through it, but once I picked up the book, I could not put it down, Lakshmi. You were my late night reading after campaigning quite a bit. And I would like to go on to say so much more about the novel, about the beauty of its heroine Malti, about the inspiration that she serves up, and how I think many of the women sitting here will see a reflection of themselves. The feistiness, the fearlessness. The book's heartbeat is earnest, it's sincere, it's courageous, it's self-sacrifice, and it is the fervent belief in one's own agency, which is what all women of today are standing up for. And then it's set in a beautiful period of time that none of us here have really witnessed, but all of us know the power, the dimension, and the importance, not just to us as Indians, but to the entire world, of the way we achieved our independence. So Lakshmi, thank you for creating this. The rebellion and the victories of the rich characters that you fleshed out in this profound churn of India and Indians draw you in and compel us to savor the joy, the acute observation that she makes, and the power of creative expression. There's only one thing that is leaving us now as we talk about Lakshmi, talk about her commitment as a public servant through her diplomatic career in the Indian Foreign Service, later as a pioneer advocating women empowerment with United Nations from United Nations Women. And that is that this delayed second career as a novelist may yet surpass everything that you have done. And this is truly a reflection of an inner brilliance of a book which came out now, but has been, I think, seeded about 20 years ago in her thought, in her mind, in her career, and in her capability. And Lakshmi, it is because of your role in United Nations Women that we cross paths. And for those who may not, be fully aware, I did mention it briefly, but she played a seminal role in the creation of the FICCI Flow Greater 50, which was our projection and our pillar towards women empowerment, cutting across all segments of society. I carried that on into G20 Empower and into BRICS Women, and Lakshmi has always been a source of inspiration for everything that I did in women empowerment. And quite fittingly, Lakshmi has been the recipient of many, many awards. I do not want to go on more because I know you all are waiting for the main evening, but I do want to say that we thank you, Lakshmi, for creating this book as a source of inspiration, for penning down thoughts that stayed within and combining your heart, your creativity, and your knowledge, and yet making it so readable and so fun. So thank you, Lakshmi. Let's give it a big hand. And I'm going to just finish. So thank you all for this opportunity to be amongst you this evening and to congratulate you and wish you the very, very best, Lakshmi. All the best.
It is an utmost pleasure and privilege to have you both amidst us today. And thank you so much for your words, Sangeeta ji. In conversation with today's star author, Lakshmi ji, we have Dr. Sunaina Singh. Professor Singh is a distinguished academic, widely acclaimed for her transformative leadership as change maker with integrity in higher education governance in the Asian region. Her expertise is delivering on challenges in executive management along with building organizational networks, building research collaborations, policy creation, and designing innovative courses as a strategic thought. Leader is exemplary. She has also straddled with ease an illustrious career in teaching and research as a professor of English and is widely recognized for her scholarship in comparative literature, cultural studies, and women's writing. She has held several leadership positions at national and international levels, apart from rebuilding Nalanda International University as its vice chancellor in the recent past. Professor Singh is widely acclaimed as an institutional builder for remodeling university academic frameworks, building research clusters, its infrastructure and governance architecture as resilient, engaged, and sustainable institutions for the 21st century. Without much ado, I request Dr. Singh to kickstart the conversation. I urge all of you to sit back and enjoy the most awaited conversation of the evening.
Good evening and namaskar. I'm very pleased to welcome Lakshmi Puri ji, Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri ji to Hyderabad. It's a warm welcome, Lakshmi ji.
Thank you.
She's worn multiple hats during her career, all through her career, a career diplomat. She started with that, an assistant general secretary, as it has already been told. And then she was executive director, UN Women, where she has done some amazing work for the women all over the world. She, also a mother and a wife, and now a writer. This book, I'm told, was sitting in her head 20 years back, and I don't know why you had to push it back. And we must, all of us must thank Puri ji, Hardeep Singh Puri ji, for pushing her to take up the assignment and complete the book. So I'm sure this book was waiting to come out, waiting to be written. An example of a truly empowered woman, I would say. Today for me it's a special honor to be in conversation with her. So thank you for giving me this honor. When I picked up the book on my way back from Chennai after an assignment, it's such a compelling reading, absolutely riveting, unstoppable. You couldn't put the book down. About 406 pages, 60 chapters, and an epigraph that seemed to be resounding in your head almost in every page. Even now, after I put down the book, and the first few lines, which she will recite very soon. So we'll come to that. But when I was reading this and after completing the book, one of the feeling that I felt was that as a reader, you are elevated, One feels courageous. It's a daunting book that takes you to another realm of elevation. You look at the positive side of life and how women and young girls need to be groomed. And this is a book which is placed in pre-independence time. So before we go on to looking at the book a little more closely, and I invite Lakshmi ji to tell us a little more about it, I think we need to give a big round of applause to the full house out here.
Absolutely.
Lovely to have everyone. And I must assure you that Hyderabadi audience is absolutely discernible and perceptible. They are connoisseurs of arts, literature, culture, music, poetry. So this evening, I'm sure they're all going to pick up a book and start reading, swallowing the sun. Yeah. Thank you for everyone to be here this evening. I must thank Hardeep Singh Puri ji for making it to Hyderabad despite the pressures and the work. You know, he does phenomenal work. And I was working with MEA for past 6 years, and I know the kind of work that he has done. And I think I perhaps can venture to say that he is doing an absolutely wonderful work as a politician and a minister, because in the urban ministry, while I was creating a net zero campus for Nalanda, I would always look up and see what is the ministry doing, and it's been a great inspiration. So thank you, Puri ji. Yeah. Now this is a best-selling novel. You know, it's now declared a national best-selling, and within 3 months of its publication, it was published in early part of 2024, which is this year itself, and it's barely 3 months. It's already a national best-selling. I see a Booker Prize coming at some point very soon. Sahitya Academy, of course, but I think numerous awards are in anvil. You know, this is a novel of audacious hope and courage. I look at it that way. Whether miracles happen or not, and we do believe they happen, we all know that, striving to attain the unattainable, the improbable. Now that is the mantra of the book. You have 2 young girls situated in the backwoods of Maharashtra, if I may say. Ratnagiri, a small village there, and the first time the girls go to a school in that village, and that itself is a big fight. You know, the father, you must tell us a little about that, but before I come to that, the epigraph is so very interesting. This is 13th century poet saint Muktabai. Very little is known about her. But long ago I was writing and I published an article on Janabai. That's when I figured that Muktabai is phenomenal in her ideas. She's much ahead of her time, you know, 13th century. And she's dreaming of the ant flies into the sky, she swallows the sun. Muktabai sees it all, and I'm skipping the 2 lines which I would want you to recite. Muktabai sees it all and Muktabai laughs. You know, she's dreaming of seeing young girls, you know, to be as courageous and aspire to swallow the sun. They may not in the end, but that aspiration is backed by the father. The passion in it, I thought, is riveting. I would want you to begin by reciting the Abhang, and then we take on from there.
First of all, Namaskar, Salam Alaikum, good evening, Hyderabad. Dear friends, the literati, the media, the cultural icons, all of the intellectual, the icons of Hyderabad, we are so happy. I'm so happy and privileged to have you all here today to celebrate the launch of my debut novel, Swallowing the Sun. And Hyderabad is a very special place. In many ways, a civilizational city where different cultures mingle, and there is this synthesis that comes up, a rich synthesis that has been happening, and it continues. So I wanted to bring it to Hyderabad also, because you know, there is, this novel is very much also rooted in Marathi literature and culture. And, you know, there is this Dakhani and Marathi influence also in Hyderabad and in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. So that is also the serendipity that I felt in coming to Hyderabad. Now, coming back to the questions that you raised, let me just begin by quoting the great Mirza Ghalib. हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले, बहुत निकले मेरे अरमां फिर भी कम निकले. So this ख्वाहिश, this arma of writing a dastane zindagi, an epic saga, was so much within me for years, even before the 20 years that you referred to. It was swirling within me, and then I started writing when I was in Budapest. And then I wrote 100 pages, and then something happened. I got a mental block. Apparently it happens to writers. And like so many things in life, it had to happen only when it happened. In 2020, just before COVID dawned, I was asked, I was pushed by Hardeep ji to really now get down to finish that novel. And when COVID came, I thought to myself, this is my labor of love. If I don't do it now, I may be dead tomorrow. So if not now, when? So that pushed me, and I worked 10 hours a day through that 1 year from June 2020 to June 2021 to finish that novel.
And you wrote it all on the iPhone?
And I wrote it all on the iPhone. So, it was also a time when you go inwards and you are able to then, give that kind of intense contemplation that writing a novel like this, and I'm sure any novel, requires. So that is that story or that journey. But it is also, I'm often asked, why did you raised the issue of why did you write about that period, and whether or not it is a biography.
Yeah, we'll come to, I thought
Okay.
first I wanted...
Okay, you want me to say
to set
something about
the tone.
Muktabai.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Muktabai, this 13th century saint, poet, saint, and a teenage woman poet. I was very obsessed by this Abhang since my childhood. But when I was writing this book, and I think halfway through this book, I didn't have a title. I was juggling various titles in my mind. She just appeared to me. I'm, mystically inclined too. So it was just like as if she revealed herself to me and told me, commanded me that this should be, as you said, the mantra of the book. And that's how it happened.
Quite epiphanic there.
Yes, absolutely. Epiphany indeed.
So you must decide before we
So
get
I
on.
will,
Yeah.
I will do that. So in Marathi, it is Mungi udali akashi, tine gille suryashi, thor navlava zhala, banz putra prasavla, vinchu patala si jai, शेष माथा बंदी पाय माशी व्याली घार झाली देखोनी मुक्ताई हसली. So the ant flies into the sky. She swallows the sun. Another miracle, a barren woman gives birth to a son. The scorpion burrows down to the nether realms. The housefly begets a hawk. Muktabai sees all, Muktabai laughs.
So beautiful, so beautiful.
So
very evocative.
So this message of Muktabai, you referred to the fact that it is the epigraph, it is the leitmotif, and you have indeed explained what it means in terms of the characters that are the women characters and some men characters too, who are driven by that, that they're touched by magic, so to say, to try and attain the unattainable. What seemed unattainable, given their circumstances, to break boundaries, to dare, to have faith that they can attain what seemed at that time to be unattainable. And it is also at the national level, like, you know, even Mahatma Gandhi and the big leaders who were participating in the freedom movement, they didn't think at that time that they could really attain independence. It seemed impossible, but they were all part of being Muktabai's ants and swallowing the sun.
So you've also dedicated this novel to your parents.
Yes.
Also who have inspired you, you know, to attain the unattainable. Tell us a little about the biographical element in the novel before we venture into the characters and the storyline.
Yes.
Briefly tell us about that, because I'm sure that also has been an inspiration, the way you were brought up. Just as, you know, the fathers play a very important role in a girl's growth and, you know, forming her personality. You've given the entire novel as a panoptic vision of how girls can blossom, provided they're given the courage to study, to explore new realms of life.
Yes.
And it's, as I said, quite a riveting experience. So tell us a little about your parents and the biographical note in the novel.
Well, my parents were extraordinary people, and they lived in epic times. This period from 1918 to 1950 was one of the most tumultuous periods of Indian history, and there was a confluence of the freedom struggle, the civilizational reawakening, the reclaiming of our civilizational swamitva, of our, self, our civilizational self, selfhood, if you will. And it was also a time of great cultural efflorescence, flowering in Maharashtra, certainly, and in many other parts of India. And I've tried to, of course, use that. And the three reinforced each other. And so, the generation of young people, because this is a coming of age story, as much as it is a feminist story, it is a coming of age novel which captures the lives, the struggles, the loss, the triumphs of young people in this era, and who contribute to this freedom struggle, who contribute to the cultural efflorescence, who also are awakened, fiercely awakened into realization of their Indianness, and at the same time they are driven by it. So it is, that very special inflection moment of history that I try to capture. But I also do it with a purpose. And that purpose is that, and there are so many parallels to where we are now. I also do it with a purpose that, you know, if you don't learn from history, you are condemned to repeat it. So we must draw lessons from how we won our freedom. Remember how, not only how, but who helped us, but also how we must not be enslaved again. And that, you know, the post-colonial state we must restore. And also, they, you know, it is, there is this mansikta, gulami ki mansikta. That has to be shed. So this novel is very much about that, asserting and being comfortable in the Indian skin and setting your own, and something that also relates to the mood of the country today about our being, you know, our finding our own place in the world as a Vishwa Guru, as a Vishwamitra, and also aiming towards being a developed country, because these young people are reimagining themselves at that time. They are reimagining the society around them, and they are reimagining India. So right now, we are in that flux, in that very, you know, creative moment in our history. And it's so, so I feel that this, you know, this story, this, this period, and the young people's, you know,
Aspirations.
They also what they did, who they were, resonates with the present as much as it points to our future and shapes our future.
Yeah.
So that is the other aspect. And one last thing which I would like to say about why I chose this period also, and I think many critics have said that I have created three-dimensional characters because they seem so ideal. And they turn around and say that, you know, do we have such people? Can we have such people today? My answer to that is, it's not only three-dimensional, but four-dimensional people that I have, 4D people that I've tried to create. It is, you know, people who are intellectually, emotionally, physically, but also intentionally alive. And so, intentional in the sense that they have an awareness beyond the self. Of course, self-awareness, but beyond the self about who they are in the universe.
Wonderful. Very interesting.
They are intentional also, not only being in the present, but also having a perspective of the past and of the future.
Okay.
So this generation of people were like that.
Yeah.
And I would very much like our young people
To imbibe.
to imbibe
To
that.
imbibe. So let me very quickly for our audience give a sense of the storyline as it goes in the novel. This is the journey of two young girls, you know, 8 or 9-year-old in Ratnagiri, and they're put into a school where there are no girls at all boys school. These are the pioneering girls to join. And the novel opens with a fight between Bhika and Malti. Malti is the protagonist, the heroine of the novel. And the journey is, the father is aspirational. He wants his daughters to study, maybe go to college, do post-graduation. Marriage, he doesn't even think about it. And we are talking about 1918. You know, so it moves from Ratnagiri to Indore, where they are put into Ahilya ashram after they lose their mother. The father calls them half orphans. So we'll talk about that too. But the girls moved from Indore after completing with distinction their schooling to Mumbai to get into a college, Bombay then, and they do exceedingly well there. And both of them find their soulmates also there. So it's a journey of, in the backdrop of independence movement, you have these youngsters who are, these are the unknown heroes who have fought and contributed to our independence struggle, you know, and each one of them is a hero in their own merit, I thought. So the girls, you know, moving from a small-time village to Indore, Ahilya Ashram is where the orphans study. So the father says, you're half orphans, you've lost your mother, so I would want you to be there. So it's like going through a very tough regime, which forms their personality. And I thought, manzile milengi, bhatak kar hi sahi. गुमराह तो वो होते हैं जो घर से निकले ही नहीं. That's the शेर, जो घर से निकले ही नहीं. And these girls, you know, have explored the entire gamut, and then they move on to, Malti moves to Varanasi to teach in BHU.
Yeah.
And then she goes to Shimla and back to Delhi, to the national capital where her husband is part of the constitution writing with Ambedkar ji and the team. So it's such an interesting journey that the women characters, particularly Malti and her sister, you know, they go through gamut of emotional experiences, the turbulence of finding themselves. It's an identity quest. The novel is about history as being a compelling teacher, you know, for today's generation, as you rightly pointed out. So tell us, I was a little intrigued by Sarla. Sarla is, Sarla and then later on Veena. Sarla is pining for her father's love, and she somewhere feels that she hasn't received a proper recognition and love. So she seems to be, to my mind, taking sort of revenge on men, jumping from one man to another and condescending towards men, always finding fault with them. Tell us a little about how did you juxtapose Malti and Kamla with Sarla and Veena? Very interesting girl characters, I would say. Very young, but, you know, different kinds of characters. Tell us a little about that before we move deeper into the novel.
Sarla is one of my favorite creations. You know, when I was writing the novel, there were many characters, not many, but I would say about 3-4 characters I had an idea about that were in real life, like my mother, my father, my grandfather, Baba, you know, who is Baba. So some of these characters are taken from real life. But of course, I make them go through different corridors and different destinations. But these are some others are characters that I have created, and I'm very fond of them. And Sarla is one of them. Veena also. But both Sarla and Veena are again, like Muktabai's aunts, always raring to break boundaries, and they do. And they do make a difference in the firmament. They do fly, but eventually, both of them, in some ways, have a tragic end. Sarla's character, I mean, it's interesting how you portray Sarla, but I see her as someone who's always wanting, she is the daughter of a feudal, lord, right? And but she's got the opportunity to study, so she is intellectually evolved, emotionally unstable. So that is, and then she's falling in love first with a British tutor, then with a freedom fighter, And and then she gets married to this another feudal Abhimanyu. So all the time, she is one of the characters who most expresses what she wants in life. And I really want to also say that in the novel, I have tried to use tradition, epics, and the Shastras to actually disprove the interpretation which is anti-women, which has been made.
You must give that reference. You
I must give you that reference. How young Sarla, she's complaining to her friends Malti and Kamla, because Malti and Kamla come for vacations to Vaishali, where she is. And, she complains that my husband is not showing any passion, any desire, and I'm very frustrated. So Malti says to her, but women are not supposed to feel any desire. So she says, who says that? You shouldn't be talking like that. You know Kautilya, what he said? And then she quotes Kautilya to say that women have twice the appetite for food than men. They have 8 times the sexual desire, and they have twice the astuteness and 6 times the courage.
We didn't know this Kautilya at all, when
we quote Kautilya for something else, Arthashastra
as an economist and
economist,
strategist.
statecraft, diplomacy. But, there is Sarla quoting this, and then so the girls don't believe her because she has a habit of, pilling. So then she quotes the Sanskrit verse. So this is Sarla, expressing her sexuality, expressing her whatever she wants, and then also playing the politics of the household and all of that.
The Bada Ghar and the Chota Ghar.
But she and Veena, the film star, who becomes one of the most awarded and celebrated film stars, then suddenly gives up everything and becomes a sannyasi. So both these girls,
intriguing characters.
They fly into the sky, but in some senses they are swallowed by the sun rather than swallowing the sun.
Yeah. So let's move to Baba. Baba is such a courageous father. At a time where the village heads, all the other men did not want to educate their daughters. He says that I want my daughters to go to school, and then he holds a meeting in the village inviting all the villagers that you all must send your daughters to school. We're talking about 1918 and 15 or 18 thereabouts, and then later on when he puts them into Ahalya ashram, which is actually an orphanage, as half orphans, as I said earlier. And then he has the courage, I thought, and the conviction to see his daughters as someone, the ant flies into the sky. I thought he is a fitting example of how the believes that the girls can swallow the sun, can do the improbable in that time and age. We are talking about pre-independence time. That's very interesting, I thought. So, you must tell us a little about Baba, but also the mother, when they're about 10, they lose their mother. And just as children do not understand death, the two daughters, they don't understand. They wonder what's happened to their mother. A sudden loss, and then they're called half orphans. But then much later, Guru, who marries, who's Malti's boyfriend, part of his love her love life. You know, when he talks about his mother, he had also lost his mother. You must read that, part of quote N.V. Tilak's poetry, where the pathos of losing the mother, you know. And at that point, Malti, who's already grown up, you know, she is guilt-ridden, and she says her memory has faded about her mother.
No,
and the
she
guilt.
only remembers the
Please tell us
happy
about-
memory.
Yeah, please tell us about.
yeah.
And do read N.V. Tilak, because I thought that's again.
Yashwant Sodhi. Yashwant Sodhi. Okay, no, so, Baba, you know, fathers have a central role in empowering daughters. And this I want to say to all the fathers here and out there. My father was a feminist, and my grandfather, on whom Baba is modeled, was actually not only he was influenced by Maharshi Karve, Mahatma Phule, and all these social reformers at that time, many of them from Ratnagiri, by the way. Yeah. So he was really driven beyond his own daughters even. As the book describes, even in Desai Kheda, he fights a veritable Mahabharat in order to get girls to go to school. So that he had that kind of a missionary zeal for women's empowerment, and he gave his daughters the full opportunity. He made sure that after they finish school, they don't immediately get married, but then they go on to finish college. After that, also careers. And also the fact that women can do anything, be anything. Women's place is not in the home. It is every place. That message he keeps giving. And how Malti says, I'm not just a girl, I'm Malti. So, that's the spirit he inculcates in her. Of course, it is then there inherent in her. But you need someone supportive. And of course, her mother, on the other hand, is the traditional Indian housewife, mother, wife, who looks at her, she talks about the fifth caste, women being the fifth caste, and Stri Dharma. And so she is looking at her husband's antics, if I may put it that way, of giving the girls full freedom to climb mango trees. There's another chapter about the mango season and how these girls are romping around on mango tree branches. So he gives them full freedom, and she is mixed, She must obey her husband, but her upbringing tells her that this may not be the right thing for her daughters. But in the end, her dying wish to her husband is, give my daughters the full freedom to be someone themselves. So, anyway, let me quickly read a passage, this chapter, a passage to heaven, which is about how Ai dies giving birth to a son, a much desired son. And the girls wake up. They don't know that this has happened. They wake up and they find that in the courtyard, she is lying covered with a white sheet. The girls rushed out into the courtyard. They saw Ai lying on a reed mat instead of a famed patchwork quilt splashed with the green of the mango leaves and yellow of its fruit, the blue of the sky and the brown of the earth. She had chosen to cover herself with the white foam of the ocean. Her baby bulge had disappeared, so the baby must have arrived, they thought. She looked beautiful, even angelic, All she needed were wings. Her curly hair was in wet coils from having had a bath to wash off the Red River, perhaps. And this is a reference to how they used to see their mother having miscarriages and, leaving a trail of blood. And they used to see it from a crack in the door. So her face showed no trace of pain, brave always. There was even a smile. She was saying, "See, I have given your Baba a son and you a brother after all." Malti came close to Ai and called out to her, the one who would say, "Hoy, ale ga," to any call from her daughters, any time of day and night, did not reply. Kamla started singing Gopala's wake-up song, improvising the lyrics. Uthi, uthi, ai, ai, kuthe geli tu माझी mai. I continued to sleep peacefully. Those eyes that always looked out for them were shut. Malti shook her, feather light, soft and warm eye, who walked ever so briskly, turu, 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 had become heavy and immovable, like a cold stone statue of the mother goddess, giving benediction without responding.
Wonderful, so interesting, look at the pathos there in the section when the girls look at the mother very sadly, without understanding what has happened to their beautiful mother, and the loss that hits them much later on with guilt. When Guru talks about, that is poet Yashwant's ode to a mother.
So this is,
Would you,
yes,
that would be lovely.
आई म्हणून कोणी आईस हाक मारी ती हाक येई काणी मज होय दुःखकारी स्वामी तिन्ही जगांचा आई विना भिकारी ती हाक येई काणी मज होय दुःखकारी. So this is poet Yashwant saying that he's lost his mother, and Guru very much resonates to this and actually cries when he recites this. And it's expressing the fact that if you don't have a mother, even the Lord of the three worlds, though anyone rise to be, without his mother, he is but a woe-begone beggar like me.
So beautiful. I wonder how you've translated the Abhang and the Marathi poetry into English. It's transliteration, you said, and not a translation, because English language is not well equipped with the vocabulary of Indian emotions or passions, our sentiments. Somewhere the language falls short of expressing that. So how challenging was that? Because you've done that across the novel.
Yes.
And very impressive. You must tell us a little about the journey of transliterating. You do that to Tukaram,
Yes.
because then you
Yes.
have Yashwant, then you have Tilak, N.V. Tilak. I would want you to recite
Yes,
that a
yes.
little later on
Yes.
when we are talking about the young girls again. So tell us a little about your journey of translating, because I think there's a very good translator in you.
Well, I was exposed to Marathi poetry because my father was himself a poet and playwright in his young days, as Guru is in the novel. And although I must say that I haven't found his original poetry and plays, but he had a notebook, 1926 vintage, where he wrote down his favorite poems and he would recite them every day to us, every evening. This was a ritual. And he would set it to a different tune every time. I mean, every poem had a different tune. So, the cadence.
He would recite it?
He would recite it with a different tune. Wow. Every poem was set to, just like the one which I just recited, he set that tune to that poem. So, I have used, so it was within me, all these poems. Therefore, although I struggled to translate, I knew what the meaning was. So I could, be as faithful as possible in transliterating, in interpolation, in extrapolation that you need to do when you translate from such a rich language into another rich language.
Beautiful.
But anyway,
beautiful.
So,
let's look at, I have two more questions. I hope we are not running out of time.
The poems.
So I was also thinking in the same line of thinking, you talk about a brave young generation who's part of freedom struggle, and that there's so much passion in them to fight in different ways. And there's a chapter in the novel Metamorphoses where you quote O'Shaughnessy's poem, Ode, which talks about the youngsters being movers and shakers of the world. How reclaiming the sovereignty is the prime goal of the youngsters while they are in college there. I thought that resonates so well because that was Renaissance of India, a new India at that time. I thought it resonates with the new India that's emerging today.
Yes.
Because we are talking again of a new India today. And how do you correlate the youngsters? Because I think the youngsters would resonate with this novel and be inspired to contribute to the nation building, And that passion again is the Malti and Guru when they explain the poem, which is such a evocative poem again by O'Shaughnessy, a 19th century English poet. And you must tell us the correlation of the youngsters then and the youngsters now. Tell us your views about us.
Sure. I think I've already spoke quite a lot about the youngsters then and the youngsters now, but you are right. In the context of the freedom struggle, both Malti and Guru and the others who are involved, right from staging a theater of resistance, the Satyeche Gulam play they stage, to participating in satyagraha activities, to going and protesting against the Simon Commission with their classmate Yusuf Meher Ali. And then later on, Malti, when she becomes a lawyer, she is able to, her swallowing the sun moment is when she fights a political trial against one of her, someone whom she considers family, but who's a revolutionary, and he's accused of sedition and he's accused of treason. And she defends him successfully. So all of that is to show that young people, ordinary young people, can make a contribution towards, in this case, freedom struggle and getting freedom, because without these ordinary freedom fighters, the Gandhis and the Savarkars would not have succeeded. So that is one. And the other is that women power deployed. You know, that women, not much is talked about or spoken about
Their
women's contribution to the freedom movement. So my novel really shows them as sheroes, as actors, you know, in the freedom movement, which is quite a rare, and it's you know, these are the unsung heroes, but also unsung heroes. And today, for the young people, I want to say the same thing, that there is so much that you can do to nation building.
Yeah.
And I would quickly read the passage. By the way, I thought that movers and shakers was a very relatively new term. And there I come across this
19th
ode,
century.
which actually talks about movers and shakers. It's actually English race and imperialist poem, but their professor, Wodehouse, asked them to interpret it as Indians would. So Malti, she almost risks getting suspended from college. So she says, Professor Wodehouse lauded what Guru said. He was more diplomatic. What to Malti seemed a restrained, if not a tame reply. She expressed herself far more candidly. Sir, I would like to dip it into the colors of Indian nationhood, the saffron of sacrifice, the green of prosperity, the white of harmony, and the purity that our freedom fighters have evoked. Though we young Indians may appear to be world losers and world forsakers, the evocation of each age is a dream that is dying, is about the death of British imperial glory that I desire and foresee happening soon. We are eager to welcome an age that is coming to birth, that of freedom for India from British rule, and the rebirth of all Indians and their civilization.
Absolutely. So inspiring to the youngsters today. I thought that's why I thought that the young readers will have so much to learn and to contribute to the nation building. We come to, to romance, on a lighter note. But not really a lighter note, I would say, because one of the sub-themes of the novel is also romance. So you so beautifully, sensitively reignite romance in today's age where we have forgotten to romance. It's an age which has no time for romance, which has no time for love letters. And there's reference to 148 love letters. Guru's love letters are poetry by itself, when he writes to Malti when she's teaching in BHU and he is away in Mumbai and then later on. So how did you, a chance to do that? Because there's a biographical element too. And I think you should read up or recite Balkavi's Prem Lake, which is Prem Patra, love letters, which these days with messaging or WhatsApp and emojis, we forgot the emotions, I found that very interesting. Tell us about your father, the 148 letters, and read some letters for our audience.
Yes. So, indeed, these letters are from 1929 to 1932. And it's a treasure trove of love communicated, expressed, of many other sentiments. It's a mirror into those times, and of course, that was very much drawn upon by me in writing this novel. More broadly, even outside the letters that I have used and quoted. So let me just say this, just to say what it meant to Malti, who was working. Just imagine this young lady who's working for the first time, she's come out and she's alone, she's working in Banaras Hindu University as a professor, and Guru is separated from her and she has no one else there. So alive were Guru's letters that they threatened to incarnate into Malti's alter ego, teasing her mind with riddles about the universe, dipping into her soul in contemplation, whispering confidences into her ears, serenading her unabashedly, touching her body with the feather of his words, giving advice when she was in a quandary, affirming her actions when she took adventurous decisions, sharing her disappointment at setbacks, yet not allowing her to rue his mistakes. So now let me read a very seminal, typical letter, I would say. He says, I do my usual pilgrimage to the letter box and feel crestfallen when your letters do not arrive. I see this as a punishment for my coldness and formality, perhaps, and I deserve no better than death, cold silence. It is such a horrid torture to wait for a letter that never arrives, or which sluggishly arrives the next morning, if at all. A troubled day, a sleepless night, an anxious heart, and an ailing body. That is all my gain, my dear Malti. How can you be so superbly careless, Malti, when I'm so punctiliously careful?
Wow.
And then
the other one, yeah, it's on page number 317, which is again very interesting. To delay is to deny. That's the chapter.
The Balkavi, the Prem Lake.
Yeah,
Prem
please.
Lake.
Prem Lake.
So, this is, you see, I have used poetry, as you said, as a kind of, I've infused it throughout the novel. To drive various themes, and one of them, of course, it is an epic love story, and it has been seen as a grand romance of the kind which has not been written in recent times. And indeed, it is also for the young people today to feel that they should ignite that romance back into their lives. And I hope they do. And poetry is something that is so potent,
Absolutely.
In conveying
Your
sentiments
emotions.
and love, and in every sense, love in every sense. It may be carnal, it may be intellectual, it may be aesthetic, it may be spiritual even. So all of that, all the embodiments of love, I try to convey. Now, let me just
This is
recite
Balkavi.
to you a poem which when he proposes to Malti, declares his love for her the first time. They are sitting on a beach, and he writes the verse on the sand as he recites it. So this is the Prem Lake. मेघांचे करी भूर्जपत्र धरुनी अस्तांजली प्रत्यही स्वर्गीचे नवलेख कुमकुम रसे ती सांध्य देवीलिही रात्री शांत गभीर अंबुनिधीच्या आनील पृष्ठावरी लज्जालेखली विकंपित करे ती तारका सुंदरी सारे ते मगलेख तुच्छ गमती चित्ताची आलोचनी तिचा क्षयलेख एकच उभा मी मग्न पारायणी.
क्या बात है, बहुत खूब. Can you translate that?
So, holding the birch bark of clouds in her hand, the glorious sunset as a perennial witness grand, her pen dipped in the red sap of my love infinite, the evening goddess writes a new missive exquisite. With enchanting shyness her cheeks suffused, my beloved rests her lotus head on my chest bemused. She creates our love epistles mystique in the poetic language of our breaths unique. All those other lyrical outpourings magnificent in my heart's eyes seem so trivial and insignificant, for I am the sole, rapt and discerning reader vernal in the universe of this my beloved's love letter eternal.
Beautiful, beautiful. Would you like to read another letter which you have taken from the 148?
No, I was more, keen to also share with you another poem, another mood, very briefly. When they finally, after this love story is also about how their love is unconsummated for around 8 years, nearly 8 years. And finally, when they get married, they run away to Nainital and they have a Arya Samaj wedding, and it's their nuptial night. Guru recites a poem which is about love unfulfilled. So Malti asks him, why this? Today is our day of the glorious day of love fulfilled. So he said, it may well not have happened, and so that we may cherish it always, we must remember it with this poem. So this is what this Madhav Julian poem. एकत्र गुंफून जीवित धागे प्रीतीचे नर्तन नाचलो मागे एकटा उभा मी येथे भोवती शोधी प्रियेथे ना दिसे का कोठे सोडूनी गेली हाले न बोले न करे न केली. So, I'll just give the pulsating with life we together flowed, the gift of the dance of love once bestowed. A solitary pond, muddied and parched now I stand, searching for my beloved in this wasteland, eager to join my long-lost soulmate in vain, surrounded by sand, yearning for rain, so that I can swell with water and course through it fast, to be one with my true love, the ocean vast. And then it ends by saying, amazed and rendered unconscious by love newborn, the saffron color of passion we must don, throwing ourselves down from the edge. To surrender our life force we earnestly pledge, then we will finally attain our union with the ocean supreme, but alas, ending the cursed season of Vaisak remains but a dream.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. Guru also dedicates a poem to her, Madhu Malti. That's again full of love and passion, and the way he describes her. That's again something for readers to dwell into, I thought. But I must come to one of the intriguing part of the novel is that it's sprinkled with poetry, with Greek mythology, the Indian mythology. You have Chaucer, Pilgrim's Progress, you've quoted Tennyson, Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Ode to Immortality, Coleridge, and then you come to Tukaram, Sant Gyaneshwar, the philosophers, and Muktabai, of course. This was a generation that quoted with felicity poetry and philosophers and somewhere I thought that we are losing that generation. Memory, we do not train them today to memorize the way you have been reciting. I thought it's very important. So your thoughts on this?
Well, firstly, to say that this Madhu Malti poem is one of my original poems, not a translation. So and it is a symbol of Guru's deifying Malti. And that, he talks about installing her in my temple's sanctum sanctorum. You are my goddess. And then he goes on to pledge his whole life to you, my dreams and undreamt and undreamt for you to see and turn into miracles, the nightmares, those ghoulish pretenders to chase away with your trident and discuss. Your love fills my cup of yearning to be great for your sake, not for mine. I aspire to reach yonder distant horizons untrammeled and swing back to my cove where calm inner rivers of happiness flow, meander and rest. I will in turn shield you from non-believers in your divinity. And so he goes on to say, and then he ends by saying, O Madhumalti, let the beguiling veil of Maya once and for all be pierced and fall between the manifest and the truth, between the striving and the attainment, between the worshipper and the worshipped, between me and you. And this is then evoked by Malti later when she feels that he has forgotten to be a worshipper, that he has strayed. And then when he says, no, but I still consider you my goddess. And she turns around and says, but I am a goddess not because you made me so. I am a goddess because of who I am and what I did for you. So, there is this
exemplary self-assertion.
Absolutely.
I thought. We must give a big round of applause to Lakshmi Puri ji. What a beautiful evening. And, the way she has portrayed the entire novel. I think you can see Malti, you can see some of the characters and the thematic evolution, So thank you so much.
I just want to also quickly respond to that question which you asked about how young people today.
Yeah.
But I think it's very, very important for young people today to read books, of philosophy, of all the great the knowledge humanity has put together, and they have an opportunity. And I'm not saying they don't read it. I think they do read it on the internet, and I think in many ways they are much more informed and they have much greater opportunity to get knowledge. But there is this pyramid of knowledge, and which T.S. Eliot talks about that where is the knowledge that is lost in information, and where is the wisdom that is lost in knowledge. So it is that wisdom that books give us, and so I would ask all our young people to do that. But also, I think, in this AI chat GPT age, I was talking to one of the colleagues whose daughter is specializing in AI, And we were asking ourselves, what is the difference between, what we would be doing if we were to write a speech or write a book, and what ChatGPT. I think the two things that are different are emotion and imagination.
True.
And that you will only get from reading books and all the poetry and everything else that is so rich. And
Thank you, thank you. Just to complete that quote of T.S. Eliot, where is life that we have lost in living?
Yes,
It ends
that's
with
right,
that.
that's
Where is
right.
wisdom
Exactly,
we have lost in quest of knowledge? Where is knowledge we have lost in quest of information?
yeah.
Where is life that we have lost in living? So thank you so much. I don't know if we have time for one or two questions.
Yes. Please.
So somebody would
Give the
carry the
mics.
mic, give the mic to any hands going up. Would you like to know some thing from Lakshmi ji, or have any questions on women empowerment?
I think we have exhausted them. No.
Yeah, I
please.
think there's one
Yeah.
question coming from. Can the mic be passed on to her, please?
Oh,
Can you briefly introduce yourself? Give us your name.
which
Yeah.
one?
Once,
Aja, you can
yeah,
ask.
one second. There's a lady here, and thereafter, we let her ask the question first. Oh, I thought. No, she's.
Lakshmi ji, I would like you to read out that letter when Malti and her husband Guru were separated for a while, and the pining and the longing Guru was feeling for Malti.
303
How beautifully they had written that love letter to each other.
303 page number, I think 307. You know, it's here.
So,
I do my.
no, I've got it.
You have.
Yes. Okay.
You have.
So, I've already actually read out that part, but he says, at one time, Malti says to him, replies to his letters, and she is upset with him about something, and she says, she signs herself, yours sincerely, instead of affectionately. So then Guru's reply, it has oppressed and depressed me. I have given myself away to you. You may do whatever you want with the gift. You can get angry with it, be sincere to it, or be indifferent. And then, of course, Malti responds to that. So, but there are many letters, and I would encourage all of you to read them, because some of the letters are taken from the original. Some I have dreamt up. There is one which is when he is visiting her in Banaras, and she comes out of the Ganges River after taking a dip, and then he writes to her. That's a very romantic letter which makes her blush. So that's also there. There are many such letters.
You know, the novel is a literary masterpiece, and I think you must pick it up from on your way back.
I think
we have one question coming. No, the lady here first, and then, yeah. Why don't you? Yeah. Please introduce yourself. We can.
I think this is not working out.
It's working now. I
Yes.
guess
It's
you
working. A very warm welcome to the city of Hyderabad. We are so proud to have you here with us. You truly are an inspiration to women all over the world, I think. And hearing about your book, I can't just wait to read it. But my question to you is, it's a very simple question actually. You've achieved so much, so many accomplishments to your name. What is next from you? What can we look forward to next?
Well, right now I'm preoccupied with and I'm enjoying launching this book into the world. And I want the maximum number of people to read it.
That I'm sure will
and,
happen. Yeah.
and to translate it into different Indian languages. Because it's as much about our understanding the other and also appreciating other literary traditions in our country. You know, Marathi, Hindi. I would like it to be translated in all Indian languages if I could. But certainly I'm going to begin with Marathi and Hindi.
Nice.
And then I will go from there. And of course, I met some translator here. And if we can get it done in Telugu, I would love to do that.
Any plans for a sequel for the book?
Sequels, yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is certainly churning in my mind.
Lovely. Can't
Thank
wait.
you.
Can't
Thank
wait.
you. Thank you.
Thank
we
you
have
so
one
much.
question there. Yeah. Can you
I
pass
think
the
it's-
mic, please? Yeah.
Hello? No?
Yeah.
Am I audible? Okay. Hi, Ms. Murdeshwari. It's an honor to have you here in Hyderabad. As a student of geopolitics and who really would like to be in United Nations someday, I'm very happy that you're here in front of me. But my question to you is, I wonder who was Kautilya's wife, because when you spoke about the feisty Sarala, you were talking how energetic she was or how rebellious she was and how annoying she could be to the men back in the time. Why did you think Sarala's character was so important to be amidst the character and, like you said, an early demise of her, the exit of her? How did it affect Malti when she was so much part of Malti's life?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, you know, because she was she was the daughter of her eldest sister's husband, from the first wife. So she was the stepdaughter of her eldest sister. So there was a kind of love-hate relationship in some ways, although they related to each other at the level of wanting to break boundaries. And, you know, so they were friends in that sense. And so this courageous, rebellious girl, when she has that tragic end, when she goes hunting, she's learned riding and hunting, and she has this tragic end, Malti is deeply affected. And you will read in the book how she expresses that. Also, she feels that there is a kind of conspiracy of men to close, you know, to close ranks and not really punish the person responsible for her death. So, you know, there are these elements. And also she wonders whether, like Sarla, she could also meet being too bold, going too much out of the boundary, may result in her being swallowed by the sun. You know, so there is that element. So you, of course, you will read. Have you read the book, or are you?
I'm just first chapter into it. My
Oh,
other
okay.
question would be, you've spoken a lot about Malti and she being the protagonist. If it were to become into a motion picture someday, which actress from the past or present do you think can best play Malti?
Well, I'm happy to say that I am in conversation with a number of parties on a web series, and I hope it will on one of the OTT channels. But I don't have right now in my mind someone who fits the bill physically, although I can think of a number of those who can portray it in spirit. Alia Bhatt being one of them.
Lovely. That's so.
Priyanka Chopra is, well, I think, you know, because this person has to be shown from the time, of course, perhaps we can use a younger girl for the 12-year-old and all that. But I would think Alia, she's petite, and also I somehow I can envision her as someone playing Malti.
Lovely. That's wonderful. We don't seem to have any other questions. So, time for vote of thanks. But before that, a big round of applause again for Lakshmi.
And thank you very much to, I should have mentioned it right at the beginning. Thank you very much to our the Prabha Khaitan Foundation for hosting yet another wonderful launch and here in Hyderabad. Thank you to Najib Jangji for gracing the occasion with his august presence, and also the Jung family, Halim and all the others who have been so supportive, and the Reddys and all the others from from the group here, who have friends and family who have come forward and mobilized and supported. And thank you, Sunaina ji, for being such a wonderful, what shall I say, interlocutor, but also someone who has given her own wisdom on the book, even as you have conversed with me. Thank you very much. And my dear friend and co-conspirator in gender equality projects, Sangeeta Reddy ji. I'm deeply touched that she came all the way in the midst of campaigning. I know what that means because 5 years ago I have done it. And so thank you everybody. Thanks to the audience for being here with us and blessing this event with your presence, and for being patiently with us throughout this somewhat long conversation. Thank you.
Good evening. Before we conclude, I would like to request our chief guest, Mr. Najib Jung, to come up and bless the book launch with a few words of encouragement.
लक्ष्मी जी, मेरे दोस्त, बचपन के दोस्त, सर्विस के कॉलीग हरदीप, मैं तुम्हें जी कह नहीं सकता. सो हरदीप, सुनैना, माय ओल्ड कॉलीग, जब हम लोग साथ वाइस चांसलर थे, और आप लोग सब जो यहाँ मौजूद हैं. आजकल डिस्क्लोजर्स का ज़माना है, तो मैं एक बात पहले डिस्क्लोज कर दूं कि मैंने कई साल पहले फ़िक्शन पढ़ना बंद कर दिया था, लेकिन फिर लक्ष्मी का ये हुक्म हुआ कि मुझे यहाँ आना है तो मुझे ये किताब पढ़नी पड़ी. और ये भी मैं आपको बताऊं कि अगर आप मार्क्वेस की किताब पढ़ें, 1000 Years of Solitude, या हेमिंगवे को पढ़ें, ओल्ड मैन एंड सी, तो पहले पेज से आपकी नज़र किताब से हटती नहीं है. और वैसा ही कुछ अनुभव होता है इनकी ये किताब पढ़ने में. एक अजीब यूनिक टैलेंट, एक नया सितारा लिटरेरी वर्ल्ड में आया है. और हम लोग जब बच्चे थे तो अखबार वगैरह देखते थे कि मिसेस गांधी के स्पीच राइटर थे शारदा प्रसाद साहब, और फिर टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया के एक एडिटर थे श्यामलाल साहब. तो हम लोग इंतज़ार करते थे और कहते थे कि दीज आर क्राफ्टर्स ऑफ द इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज. और अब मैं देखता हूँ इनकी किताब पढ़ने से कि वी नाउ हैव अ क्राफ्टर ऑफ द इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज. जो आपने एक्सप्रेस किया है, इट इज़ सो कंटेम्प्रेरी, इट इज़ सो रिक्वायर्ड फॉर द यंग लेडीज़, हमारे नौजवानों के लिए. मुझे जैसे ही मैंने पढ़ना शुरू किया और ये दो बच्चियों के कैरेक्टर आए, और वो बच्ची कुश्ती लड़ती है एक भारी भरकम 14 साल के लड़के से जो उससे बड़ा है, और फिर उसके वालिद उनको इनकरेज करते हैं कि वो एक अनाथ आश्रम में जाएं اور پھر وہ کالج آئیں تو مجھے فیض صاحب کا وہ شعر یاد آیا کہ بچیوں کی طرف سے کہ بول کے لب آزاد ہیں تیرے، بول زباں اب تک تیری ہے، تیرا ستوا جسم ہے تیرا، بول کے جان اب تک تیری ہے. یہ بچیوں کا جذبہ جو انہوں نے دکھایا ہے، اور ان کا ٹریول تھرو انڈیا، تھرو اندور اینڈ بامبے اینڈ دا رومانس، it is a pleasure to read this book, and I would really advise you کہ اتنا سنا آپ لوگوں نے، میرے لیے کچھ کہنے کے لیے رہ نہیں گیا ہے. ایک زیادہ تعریف بھی مناسب نہیں ہوتی، کیونکہ یہ، لیکن انہوں نے کہا بکر وغیرہ، وہ تو مجھے نہیں معلوم، لیکن یہ میں گارنٹی کر سکتا ہوں کہ ہندوستان میں جیسے جیسے یہ کتاب ریلیز ہوگی اور لینگویجز میں انشاءاللہ یہ ٹرانسلیٹ ہوگی تو بہت لوگ اس کو پڑھیں گے. یہ بہت کنٹمپریری ہے، اور اس میں جو الفاظ کا جو سینٹیمنٹس کا ایکسپریشن ہے وہ بڑا یونیک طریقے سے لکشمی جی نے پیش کیا ہے. تو میں تو امیجیٹلی ایڈوائز کروں گا کہ آپ لوگ باہر جا کے کتاب دیکھیں، وہ بہت ضروری ہے ہم سب کے لیے. اسی لیے ایک چھوٹا سا مذاق بھی یاد آیا کہ شاعر یا ایک لوگ لکھنے والے کیسے لکھتے ہیں. تو آپ لوگوں نے سب نے، کم سے کم میرے جنریشن کے لوگوں نے میرے محبوب فلم دیکھی ہوگی. اس میں وہ پہلا سین ہے کہ ایک علی گڑھ یونیورسٹی کے اسٹوڈنٹ ہیں راجندر کمار صاحب، وہ نکلتے ہیں اور ٹکرا جاتے ہیں ایک ینگ لڑکی سے، وہ نقاب میں ہے اور ان کی صرف آنکھیں دکھتی ہیں، اور وہ آنکھیں دیکھ کے ان کو محبت ہو جاتی ہے. تو اب وہ محبت ایکسپریس کیسے کریں، لڑکی کو ڈھونڈیں کیسے؟ تو اگلے دن کینیڈی ہال میں جو اے ایم یو کا مین ہال ہے وہاں مشاعرہ تھا. تو ان کے دوست ہیں جوانی واکر، وہ کہتے ہیں میاں ایک ہی طریقہ ہے کہ کل قلم توڑ دو، سیاہی بھی جاؤ، اور تب وہ تمہیں اپریشیٹ کریں گی. تو باپ نے کچھ ایسا ہی کیا ہے کہ قلم بھی ٹوٹ گیا اور سیاہی بھی پی لی. اور ہم لوگ اب تو بٹ آن اے مور سیریس نوٹ، فیض صاحب کی بھی ایک شعر ہے، اس کا ایک لائن بڑا جلی ہے. پہلی لائن تو اس سے موضوع نہیں رکھتی کہ متاع لوح قلم چھن گئی تو کیا غم ہے، لیکن دوسری لائن کہ خون دل میں ڈبولی ہیں انگلیاں میں نے. تو یہ چیزیں ہیں جو ہم نے سنی ہیں، دیکھی ہیں، اور مجھے ایک عجیب ناز ہے کہ میرے دوست نے مجھے یاد کیا، مجھے بلایا. جب ہم لوگ کالج میں تھے تو ایک نوجوان سردار، ہم لوگ کہتے تھے ہندو کالج میں بیسٹ ڈریس سردار تھے، ایک کالی پگڑی، بڑے فٹ، اور وہ ہمارے دوست آپ کے سامنے اب بیٹھے ہیں 50 سال کے بعد. اب وہ کالی پگڑی کہاں چلی گئی، میں ابھی بھی سوچ رہا تھا کہ شاید وہ ہے کہ نہیں، مجھے نہیں معلوم، لیکن وہ ایک برانڈ تھا. اچھا یہ لیجیے. But really it's been a tremendous pleasure for me to be here. It's an honor to be here. I am honored that my friend thought of me, and this is the city of my forebears, my great-grandfather, who was the Atliq, the guardian of the 6th Nizam, and my own grandfather, who happened to be the Chief Justice of the Nizam, and my maternal grandfather, who was the Chief Engineer to the Nizam. So it's great coming back and seeing this extremely intelligent and bright audience. So thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Lakshmi, for this book.
So on behalf of Prabha Kaitan Foundation, I, Anjum Babu Khan, Asas Woman of Hyderabad, would like to express a heartfelt gratitude to Mrs. Lakshmi Puri and Dr. Singh for this delightful conversation. It was truly a pleasure to listen to both of you. And a very special thanks to our esteemed and beautifully articulate, I must say, chief guests for the evening, Mrs. Sangeeta Reddy and Mr. Najib Jung. It was so beautiful to hear your Urdu and poetry. Thank you so much for your gracious presence. And last but not least, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and commemorating this significant milestone. And without your presence and support, today's Kitab event in Hyderabad would not have been as successful and enjoyable. So on your way out, I'd like to just mention that you can purchase Miss Lakshmi Puri's book at a discount of 40% from the book counter, and she will personally autograph it for those who wish to get her autograph. So good night, everyone, and stay happy and stay healthy. Thank you.